Welcome everybody. How's everybody doing tonight? I seen some guys that was in here kind of early. We have Mike Lewis, looked like he was the first one in. James Dockery came in. Mike Sampson, Mike Irvin, fishing with the Chad. We had Squirrel. We got Thomas Littlepage in the house. How you guys doing? Hey, looks like we got a special guest today. We got Mark. Mark, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Oh, hello. My name's Mark Blauvelt. I'm a B&M pro staffer. Been fishing catfish tournaments since about 2003. Let's see here. I am the founding member of the Southwest Ohio Catfish Club. Started that in about 2003 with a few other guys. Let's see here. Over the years, I've fished over 225 tournaments, I think. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it really is.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a lot. Won a few, lost a whole lot more. I think most guys fit in that bill. Right now, I do hold the West Virginia state record for blue catfish, right at almost just a hair under 60 pounds. This will be, I think, the fourth year that I've had that. So every year it's getting closer. So somebody's certain to break it. Last year there was like 5 fish within like 3 pounds of it. So
oh, wow. Wow.
pretty confident it'll be somebody else's 15 minutes of fame, and that's great. I think somebody else should take the ball and take it a little further. So
Well, Mark, we sure do appreciate you coming in and hanging out with us for this hour tonight. I'm sorry I cut you off. You want to keep going?
no, you're fine. I was just going to say, if people have questions, dragging for channel cats is my thing. I've incorporated that. As you know, I fish all over the country. Done well bumping on the Mississippi. We've done well down in Tennessee and Alabama. Do a little everything. That's the beauty of tournaments, is fishing new water and new challenges. And that's, to me, that's most of the reason why I do it.
Right.
Nobody's doing it to make money, I can tell you that.
That's for sure. That's for sure. I think I actually met you first time in 2017. It was the Mount Vernon Cabela's. You and
Could
Ryan.
be, yeah. Yep.
I believe so.
Yep.
I think that was it.
Yeah.
What's you got any big tournaments planned for 2021?
Let's see here. So here in 3 weeks, 2 weeks, doing the Cat Masters Classic down on Wilson, Gunnersville, and Wheeler.
Nice.
I'm doing several of the Cat Masters. We're going to do Helena, Caruthersville, Mississippi River Monsters. I think a Twisted Cat at New Madrid on the Mississippi. I think most of the big tournaments we're going to do are going to be on the Mississippi this year. We really enjoy, me and my partner that I normally fish big tournaments with, Ryan Lowrance. We love the Mississippi. That's really fun. I just love the challenge of it. It's big water, challenging, but we've done well. We took second at Helena last year, so that was cool.
Heck yeah.
Placed at Mississippi River Monsters the year before. I think we were 10th. So did okay. Ryan fished one of the Caruthersville tournaments and took 6th place in a Twisted Cat. So we seem to be doing pretty well at that.
Yeah.
So that's good. It's again new challenge. It's getting like Wheeler's getting to be like my home water, and it's just there's you do what you do, and either you catch fish or you don't. So it's it's again, it's the challenge of new waters. That's what I love. So
yeah. Ryan, thanks for stopping by. We got Moonlight Fishing. Thanks for coming in. Papa Ed, appreciate you coming in. How far is Wheeler from you?
Wheeler's about 8.5 hours.
Wow, that's a long drive.
Well, we do it all the time. For me to get to Memphis is 9. So
wow.
So yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your boat. That's a big old boat to be pulling around, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, a lot of times we'll fish out of Ryan's. He's got that new Pro Cat last year, Pro Cat 200. Right. So that's a great boat. We love that. My boat is a older boat. It's a 19-foot deep V smoker craft. 19-foot. It's got a lot of room in it. I know over the years, tons of people have fished with me. Chad's been in it. I tried to get Chad started a little bit there. It's a great boat. Uh, I wish it was a little faster, had a bigger motor, you know,
We know
all
that,
those
don't we?
things. But as far as the room and everything goes, I mean, it's got as much room as anything. I got a big truck box live well in it, so it's set up well. You know, over the years, I've blown out 3 or 4 tires, blown out one axle, probably 4 or 5 hubs at least, about one a year. You know,
Wow. Wow.
trailers just, it's a big boat and it's on a single axle trailer. It probably should be on a tandem, but so, you know, it is what it is. So,
Hey, I seen Roger Dimmick come in. He wanted to make sure to say hi to you, so I wanted to point that
yep.
out real quick. Fishing with Mike Chavez. He's in here. I don't know if you know who he is or not.
I do. I try to watch some of the videos and everything where I can.
Right.
I'm, you know, I do have a life, so I try. It's not like every night I'm lined up waiting, to watch videos, but that's all right. I
You are in
watch them
Ohio.
where I can. So
You live in Ohio?
I am about an hour north of Cincinnati in Dayton, Ohio.
So we got a whole lot of guys in the YouTube community here from Ohio.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Chad and Roger and a lot of them I
right.
can't think of right now, but
Yeah, yeah. Well, Chris Souders, you got
yeah.
you got Anthony Murphy starting up some stuff up north. Who else do we have? Um, I don't know. There's a lot of guys post a lot of stuff. There's a lot of anglers in Ohio, and it's a tough crowd. If you look at Carl Morris and Rob Parsons and Chris Souders, Anthony Murphy, a lot of guys. You got Adam Daner, you got Scott Collins, and you got Scott Kress. Boy, it's just a whole slew of guys that at any given time on a national tournament they can get it done. So, not to
Yeah.
mention you got Bink and Janet. There's a bunch of guys over that way. You got Willie Smith. I've donated more money to all those guys I mentioned than I care to admit. Feels good every once in a while to take some money back, but it doesn't happen often enough.
Yes. Maurice Casey, thanks for stopping by. Scott Newton, thanks for coming in. I know we touched on it a little bit, but you travel quite a bit. You travel quite a bit. I've seen you post from everywhere.
Yeah. Again, it's the challenge of new water. I love it. So that makes me a better fisherman back home here. So I like to figure things out. And every water, every lake, every river, every piece of all of those is completely different. So
Right.
that's the beauty of it. I think most guys that fish enjoy the challenge. I mean,
Yep.
So
If you had to say what your favorite waters to fish is, what would you say?
ooh, I would say right now probably the Mississippi. Um, we talked earlier before the show. I'm a little frustrated with the Ohio River. I've just taken a beating so many times here locally because of the commercial fishing. Um, I know a lot of guys on the internet and Facebook. They are like, "Oh, those guys are always bitching up there. I don't know what the problem is." Well, the problem is there's hardly any fish left here. We were on a world class fishery, and then the netters come in and they've pretty much taken everything. They figure out where all the flatheads are in the wintering holes, and they just, I mean,
Whack 'em up.
in one year all the flatheads were gone, all of them. Out of 100 miles of water, they're just gone. And then nobody can figure out what happened. Well, that actually opened the doors for the blues to actually start doing better. And then once the blues started doing better, it wasn't long before the netters all came back and cleaned those out too. So right now we deal with a lot of small fish because, again, if you catch a 20 or 25 or 30 pounder, you're gonna win big fish more than likely in our tournaments here in the Cincinnati area. That would be the Markland pool. That
Got a question here in chat from Catmando Outdoors. Says, what is Mark's best time of the year to drag for channels?
Well, that depends. Are you looking for numbers? Are you looking for size? Are you looking to win a tournament? A lot of variables in there. So right now we're at first ice. I was actually up on a lake today that 3 days ago had 4 inches of ice. It was completely locked up. We had 36-degree water all day. And if you look at my Facebook post, you'll see that I was mostly looking for shad to stockpile for the spring. And we found them. Took us all day. We did fish for about an hour. So here at Ice Out, you can get into fish, but it's tough. They're in pockets, and you have to find where they're at in lakes. Now, once you get into pre-spawn, so let's say about 6 weeks from now, water starts getting close to 50 degrees. Those fish are really active. And when you have good warm spring, floods, dumping chocolate milk into lakes, boy, you can just hammer numbers of fish. My favorite is probably in the fall. In the fall, when I drag lake tournaments here in the Midwest, I like the fall because I'm looking for 6 or 8 bites. I'll go out in the deepest water in the whole lake, and I'll be there all by myself because everybody will be in, 5 to 15 feet of water looking for fish, and I'll be out there in 25 or 30 feet of water. And I'm looking for 6 or 8 bites, but chances are if I get one, they'll be the better fish. And again, it's that challenge of finding the big fish in a lake. And we all, all of us up here know that, some lakes, the lake I was on today has a lot of 5 to 8 pound fish. If you catch one over 9 or 10 pounds, that's a trophy in that lake. But, 6 or 7 years ago, it took a 12 or 13 pounder. Channel cats and lakes grow and show up in cycles. And so those cycles follow the good shad hatches. So here locally, the last 2 years, we had really good shad hatches. But the 3 years before that, it was not good. We had so much high water and muddy water that I think it silts out the eggs and it flushes a lot of them out. But these last 2 years, all the lakes locally have had shad just by the bazillions. And so every lake is on kind of on an upswing on size. Each year they're getting a little bigger. But just like crappies are in a 4-year cycle. I think channels are on about a 6-year cycle before they all grow and then they just die off of attrition. So if you're fishing a local lake and you can kind of figure out where you're at in that cycle, if there's lots of 2 pounders, okay, you may be early in that cycle. If there's lots of 4 pounders, you may be a year later. If there's some 5s and 6s and 7s, then you're getting there. But each lake is completely different. It's, and so, within about an hour of me, there are like 5 lakes. And, I tell people, if you want eaters, all 1 pounders, I send people to this lake. If you want loads of 2 to 4 pounders, which are fun, but they're all 2 to 4 pounds, I send you to another lake. If you're looking for big fish, obviously you're not going to have as many fish, but the size is bigger. So again, people always say, what's the best lake? Well, what do you want?
Right.
What's the best time of year? Well, what do you want? Summer's good. There's a time right after spawn. So from about June to, I don't know, here where we're at, from about the 1st of June to about the end of June, maybe 4th of July, it's a tough time. The females come in, they spawn, and they disappear for 6 weeks. Nobody can find them. And so all you catch after that are, you have to remember the channel cats, when they spawn, the males come in, they make the nest. They're cavernous spawners, so they'll find a log, they'll burrow out underneath it, and wait for the females to come in, lay the eggs. And then the female comes in, she's gone. She's gone in a day. So timing is critical to find those big females. Now, the males, they'll guard the nest and watch the fry for 4 to 6 weeks. And so that's why in late June, July, you catch all these big head, skinny body males that are all 4 pounds. and that's why. So that's where the later once I get to the end of July into August, September, and October, them fish start moving back into deep water. And that's where I really enjoy that, is that fall bite. You can catch a lot of fish stacked up in areas, and you can get some big ones. So I think that's my favorite. But again, every body of water is completely different.
Right. We had a few more people step in. We got 2 stands. Seen Big Mike, Justin, Josh, Brian B. Catfishing. Welcome, you guys. Thoughts on tournaments? What's your thoughts on pre-fishing?
Ooh.
Sometimes,
Well,
you can go out there and catch the big fish beforehand, or
I'm pretty limited on my vacation, so that keeps me from doing too much pre-fishing. A lot of times, me and Ryan will roll in Friday night or Friday afternoon and hop in the boat for an hour and a half and just look around before the captain's meeting, and that's it. I mean, we typically don't fish. If we go to Wheeler or something like that, I'll try to, if I can, fish and we'll pre-fish the day before because it's such a long trip, if that makes sense.
mm-hmm.
And if I catch a 40, 50, or 60 pounder, that's a win, even if you get them the day before the tournament. I mean, really. I can tell you my personal best down there day before the tournament. Actually, my 2 or 3 personal bests were all the day before the tournament. So, it happens, but by the time you make that long a haul, I'm not going to fish for 8 hours and turn around and come home. Try to, get there a day early.
Kind of what I was thinking. If I got the opportunity to catch a big fish, if I'm traveling 5, 6, 7 hours, I'm gonna catch that big fish no matter what day it is.
Yeah,
no matter what.
That's still right, and that's still a win. So,
So
as far
I'm
as
guessing.
oh, go ahead. I was just going to say,
I'm,
as far as my thoughts on pre-fishing, to each their own. I know guys that they'll put they'll zip tie baits to hooks where they've broken the barb off, and they'll get a pull down. The fish will get the bait, pull it off, and they'll be like, "Okay, that was a decent bite." Uh, I don't know. For me, I'm just looking for what type of water the fish are in. So a lot of times when I do pre-fish for a couple hours beforehand, I'm basically eliminating water, if that makes sense. It's like,
mm-hmm.
okay, I'm fishing inside bend. We didn't do no good here. Flows aren't any different tomorrow. There's a good chance that, at least I've eliminated water. And that's just as important as finding fish, is to be able to eliminate water ahead of time.
I think we touched on it, but when you're dragging for the channel cats in the lakes, what bait are you using?
Oh, I use shad. So, most inland lakes, shad is going to be pretty much the top bait. That's all I use. I mean, can you catch them on other things? Hot dogs, chicken. I'm sure that Chad guy, that's all he uses is chicken. I know that, but you can catch them on lots of things. So you may have heard one of the top fisheries for channel cats right now is up in Sandusky Bay, up on Lake Erie. It's loaded with big fish. So it's a unique fishery where shrimp there actually outfishes everything. Now, it doesn't mean you can't catch them on shad, but I mean, everybody fishes shrimp. But if I fish shrimp in my local lakes, I can't catch anything with it. So it's I'm sure again each local lake, I would look at the biomass in that lake, and it's probably shad, cut carp, drum. Up here, we use a lot of crappies, bluegills, in Ohio, we can use those for bait, assuming that they're big enough for the lake that you're fishing in. So if a local lake has a 9-inch crappie limit, as long as I'm fishing a crappie bigger than 9 inches,
Right.
or cutting him up, I can do that. Technically here, we can use white bass. I know, like Kentucky, you cannot use white bass. Alabama,
Yeah.
you cannot use white bass or crappie because they're game fish. So I've been known to, I've I've caught plenty of channel catfish on cut channel catfish. I'll take
Really.
those little ones and I'll cut them up. Yeah, because it's fresh. I mean, anything fresh is better than probably something frozen. So, there's a time in the spring when the shad come into the rocks to lay their eggs, come right into the banks. In middle of May usually, about the same time the crappies are in there, and I can tell you that that's a good time to use crappie for bait because they're in there. They come right in right at the end of the crappie spawn, and they'll come in. So what are they going to do? They're going to eat shad when they can, and they're going to eat crappies because they're readily available. So
We got another quick
right
question
there
in
in
the
the
chat.
spawn.
Mark, do you think Caesars Creek in Ohio will be a good lake for blue cats eventually?
Yes, I do. The biggest reason is we have so the Caesars Creek Lake is pretty close to us. It's right in the middle, but between me and Chad there, it's about an hour for each of us. So it's a very deep flood control lake, has some 120-foot water in it. It's kind of in a valley, so it's deep, and there's not a lot of shallow water. So the blues are going to do well because people won't be able to get to where a lot of the blues are. And it's one of the states. It's right in the middle between Dayton, Cincinnati, and Columbus, Ohio. So it's one of the heaviest pleasure boat lakes. And so where you want to drag out on the ledges, you just can't do it, for 6 months a year without, taking a beating from the pleasure boaters. But so because of that, I think that a few people will figure out how to catch those blues that nobody else can do. And I think there's going to be some. So they started stocking it with blue cats because blue cats are not native here in Ohio. So there's only 2 lakes, really. They just started stocking a few others. But Caesars Creek, they started stocking, I think, 3 years ago. So now we're catching like 1-pounders. So, as you know, blue cats have a small gape on their mouth. So, they're slow growing for like the first 6 or 7 years until it takes them 6 or 7 years to get to be about 5 or 6 pounds. Then once they're big enough that their mouth is big enough to start eating crappies and bluegills year round, instead of, just, struggling to find bait that they can eat. Once they're big enough to do that, then they grow phenomenally quicker. And that's where they can put on 10 pounds a year. So, but they're slow growing to start with.
Had Serena come in, Lyle from Catfish Weekly come in, Chad from Size Matters Catfishing. Seen another question from Roger. Says, do you have a rule of thumb when it comes to dragging speed, when it comes to temperature for big blues or channels?
So in a tournament, I usually start fast to figure out how active the fish are. So if you think about this, if you're in an 8-hour tournament and you're dragging at 0.5, right, that typically means you're covering 4 miles of water, right, at the end of the day. So if I can drag at 0.7 for 8 hours, now I've covered 5.6 miles in that same time. So the key is how active the fish are will tell me how fast I can drag. So if I'm getting, real short, quick, where they just whack it, but they don't hook up and they don't chase it, it's time to slow down. But I'm a firm believer in going as fast as the fish will allow me to. So in the heat of the summer, when they're active, first light, I'll be out there, 0.8, 0.9, you know. I do a lot of trolling when I'm not catfishing for crappies, walleyes, and I'll be trolling like flicker shads, little Rapala baits, and we'll catch channels at 1.7, 1.8 miles an hour, fishing for walleyes, so don't think you're going too fast for them. I mean, really, I mean, everybody here has seen, videos of Bass Pro Shops aquarium where a blue cat in a heartbeat can, suck down a 5-pound carp. They can bolt. I mean, they don't look like fast eaters, but catfish, blues, even flatheads, they're quicker than you think. I mean, they have to be to ambush prey. So my answer to that would be I would go as fast as the fish tell me I can go. I always start fast and slow back down. So that's kind of my rule that I do.
I believe we've covered it, but we're going to go ahead and safe to say that dragging is your favorite technique.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, that's what I cut my teeth, and that was mostly here on all these local lakes. So I started dragging probably in about probably 2006 or 7, maybe in that time frame. I was actually at a tournament at Rocky Fork Lake. We have a big spring classic, always has about 40 or 50 teams. And I don't know if you know the name Skip Martin. Skip here is a legend in Ohio. He had been dragging for 2 or 3 years. I mean, just whacking fish, just spanking people left and right. And I saw him do that in that tournament, and he had like 50 pounds of channel cats, and like second place had like 22 pounds. I mean, it was like, holy cow. He was just hammering fish all day long. And, everybody else was out there throwing bobbers and fishing on the bottom, all anchored. And I was like, man, I got to figure that out. So I just started playing on my own. I would watch other people. There was other people that were trying to just start trying to figure out how to drag. But I just went in head first and figured it out. And I figured out a lot of stuff. I'll talk about that here in a little bit, but a lot of stuff I figured out. And to be honest, man, I made a fortune for 4 or 5 years because, the anchor guys would be like, oh, we caught like 8 fish. We had a good day. And I'm thinking, I caught 30 fish today, just because I was able to cover so much water. As this dragging thing is a new thing. And, one of the things that I'm trying to figure out now is now everybody drags. And so everybody's figured out what to do. The internet certainly hasn't helped in that regard. People give away all the secrets, although I still have a few. But, I've been experimenting with a few things, definitely out of the box, trying to figure out that next thing. So as a tournament guy, you have to do that.
Right.
And,
Right. Definitely.
Yeah. Always experiment.
A few more people come in. The Reef Robbler, Buckeye Catfishing. Betty came in. Appreciate you guys stopping by. And I'm pretty sure you use planar boards. And how many do you drag at a time?
Well, here in Ohio, we're limited inland. Inside the state, we're allowed 2 rods per person. If I go to Alabama and we're in a tournament, me and Ryan, we may run 13 or 14 rods, and we'll drag 4 sets of planar boards, 4 down each side, run probably 4 off the back, and 1 or 2, straight down or on a short line. So it can get pretty hairy, but as you get better, you can manage all those lines. So people are always like, holy cow, man, what is the deal? Do you need that many rods? Well, we learned that up here fishing the Ohio River that, yeah, you do need that many rods. So Ohio just allowed for the Ohio River and up in Lake Erie the use of 3 rods. So that's a good deal. But so when I drag in my lakes, I prefer to side drift with the wind and drift socks. I seldom troll with the trolling motor unless I absolutely have to. I hate that. It's a much more natural presentation to side drift with some drift socks out. We were doing that today. So I had 4 drift socks out today for about an hour. Now, we didn't have any luck, but we had about a 15-mile-an-hour north wind. And this time of year, that gets cold because when I'm side dragging, you're facing right into the wind. And it wears on you. So, but
I've
like I
seen
said,
some questions in chat. People are asking about dragging on the rivers. Will you kind of go into detail about how you drag upriver when with low current?
yeah. So depending on the current, um, it's easier to drag upriver, but in all reality, um, I think dragging downriver has its advantages. So just food for thought with that. Um, so in a lake, and I learned this from years of lake fishing, when I side drift with the wind, I'm bringing baits um, towards the fish, right? So if you think about fish, say you're on a bridge over a creek and you look down and you see all the suckers and carp, which way are they facing? They're all facing upriver, right? And they're looking and they can see things coming towards them. So if you bring a bait from behind them and it goes past them, now some fish will, actively seek that out and grab it. If I'm side drifting, I am bringing baits because even in a lake, fish are all pointed typically into the wind because that's where currents and the wind are bringing food to them. So they face into the wind. So I do way better. So I'll side drift through a pot of fish, get 6, 7, 8 fish over 15 minutes, and I'll turn around. And instead of, dropping the trolling motor and dragging back up through them, I circle way out and around and I come through them again because I've tried the turn around, drop the trolling motor, drop rod straight out the back and troll back up through them and maybe only get 1 bite. But as soon as I get all the way to the other end and I turn around and side drift through them again, I'll catch 5 or 6. I've proven that to myself 100 times. So, while dragging upriver is good because it's easier to maintain the boat and the speed, because typically your trolling motor, is that way. I'm just saying, in a perfect world, I would maybe drag up and then turn around. And if the current's slow enough, try dragging downriver, see what happens. I'll just throw that out there. Again, don't do what everybody else is doing. Don't be
Right.
afraid. Try something different. And you have to think about, from a fish's perspective, if he can see the bait coming when you're dragging it towards him, he can line up on it a lot quicker and easier than, oh, it went past me. And you're going to have to be awful close to him for it to see it. Where in the meantime, as you're dragging down towards him, the tuft of mud is going faster and he's sensing there's something going on there. It's almost like bumping, as you understand, by going slow versus back bouncing. If you're back bouncing or vertical drifting at the same speed, your scent is staying in the same area as your bait. But by slowing your drift down with the trolling motor, the scent now leaves your bait and it gives fish a chance that cross that trail to zero in on it, and they'll swim back and forth until they zero in on it until they meet it. And that's the beauty of bumping or even back bouncing for that matter. So it's a little off topic, but as far as dragging upriver, obviously you can do it. In the summer, you can find a lot of fish potted up that way. I will say that when you find big pods of fish in the summer, they're usually small fish. Same in the fall. You get into that July, August, where the Ohio River is low current. you may whack a bunch of fish. But if you're looking for big fish, you need to get out of those pods of fish. Big fish is not going to hang with a school of little eager guys that will beat him to the food every time. Big fish are loners and they're by themselves. So, I may start in a pod, catch, maybe go through 8, 10, or 12 fish, get my 5 in the live well or whatever. But then I'm leaving. Now I'm going to try to upgrade those fish. Where other people will just weed through that whole pile all day. And at the end of the day, maybe they do better than me. Maybe I do better than them. But it's a gamble you always take. But that's been my opinion, is that they, when they're schooling, they're all the same size.
We got a question from Betty Cross. She wants to know what your personal best is from Rocky Fork. I believe that's the question.
Rocky Fork, have a couple probably between 16 and 17 pounds. Yeah, probably between 15 and just under 17 pounds. So Rocky Fork is not the lake that it used to be. Between pressure and a little earlier, I was talking about each lake has a cycle, and Rocky Fork's on a down cycle and rebounding right now. So there's still some big fish there, but I think in 2 more years is when you're going to catch your 15, 16, 17, 18 pounders. My personal best in Ohio, well, or anywhere for channel cat, is up in Clear Fork, just north of Columbus. I got an 18.2, and that was like 10 or 12 years ago. My local lake, my home lake, my tournament practice lake, where I do a lot of weird experimental stuff. I have, I think, 7 or 8 fish between 16 and 16 3/4. So some nice channels in there.
Seen another question. Try to find it here. I'm sorry, I've lost it. Something about if the planer boards will spread correctly pulling downriver.
Well, now see, again, when you're coming downriver, you're going to have to go faster than the current. So I'm talking about in an area where there's hardly any current at all, or like 0.2 or 0.3. Like I said, the heat of August, September, where it's basically a lake. So you will have to run at like 0.5 to keep them spread. And again, that's a challenge. But what may be easier would be to just drag down river with some lines, behind the boat. But it is a challenge to do that. A lot of people are fishing the planer boards now. And again, this is here in Ohio, probably 10 or 12 years ago, we started fishing planer boards, just trying them out. I have a lot of friends that do a lot of multi-species, and I do a lot of multi-species fishing. So, you learn from the walleye guys. If you want to learn how to troll, you hop on YouTube and start watching walleye guys. If you want to learn how to long line and vertical fish, watch a bunch of crappie guys. There are no new things. This dragging baits is not a new thing. I mean, it's new to catfishing, but it's not new. It's not new to the fishing world. So, again, everybody's on these planer boards, but again, I think right now in the catfishing world, it drives me batty. I see people, saying, "Oh man, these planer boards are the best," or "These are the best," or "These are the best," and it's the typical catfish drama that we see all the time. If I'm always pulling a 2-pound skipjack, then maybe I want the biggest, heaviest boards that can float the most amount of weight. That may be fine, but that's not what I do. I use the same boards whether I'm on the river. I use the original clear boards because they're light, and I can use them to catch a 2-pound channel, or I can use them to catch a 60-pound blue. So I don't have to have multiple boards. My same boards that I use for 60-pound blues, I use trolling for walleye, and I use trolling for crappie, because like all people, there's not enough time and money in the world. And, I don't have the room to carry multiple sets of boards. So I want one board that fits everything. So most cat fishermen, should be in that same thing. People are like, what's the best rod? Well, I'm not saying this rod is any better than that rod. Obviously I'm sponsored by B&M and I like their rods. Do I say they're the best rods? No. Are they the best rods for the way I fish? Yeah. Or else I'd be using somebody else's rods. It's that simple. So again, you have to adjust things to the way you fish to really benefit from them. And that's something that, you don't see. I see all the, we have so many new people in the sport right now. And it's, what do I need? What do I want? What's the best? Well, you just can't answer that question. There's just so many variables. Tell me, take an hour, tell me everything you do and want it to do, and then I can point you in the right direction. But in the meantime, it's just very unnerving to see those posts, and then the people that actually reply to them. It's like sometimes it's like, I don't know. You just scratch your head. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I sure do. We've had a few more people come in since Paula came in. Mark with Catfish and Crappie. Two guys. Scott Weissman come in.
Hey,
We're
Scott.
talking about rods. Let's go ahead and jump into do you what the dragon the rods for dragon. Do you like a sensitive tip?
So, again, another fallacy that a lot of people think is they need a flexible tip for dragging so that they can, see the rod. I prefer a much stiffer tip so that when a fish bites it, right, he's got direct pressure. It's pulling that hook into him. On my channel cat rods, I actually am using a 5-year-old B&M Generation 1 bumping rod. It's very stiff. And I've snagged every one I can find because for me, they're the perfect channel cat rod. So there's some rumors in B&M that they're going to bring out a channel cat specific rod here in the next year or so. So I'm hoping that's going to be good. I've given a lot of input on that, but I like a stiff rod for channel cats. Now for blues, I like a rod that is stiff, but has a little bit of flex in the tip, just a little bit, but it has the backbone, not a flimsy rod all the way through. It needs to be a stiff rod. But again, that tip is a little bit of a shock absorber, when you bumping across the bottom, and it's maybe what we call a sticky bottom, right? Where it sticks and it hangs, you need the pressure there. And the bend in the rod will release that at times and release it in a slow fashion, like it's a crawdad or something hopping off the bottom. I always prefer dragging with mono, never braid, never. Because, and I'm sure the guys that fish braid, and a lot of guys swear by braid, but I think that's because they haven't tried the mono. The mono has just enough drag in the water so that when you hit bottom and it's bumping, bouncing across the bottom, it's much slower. I don't know if you guys ever drag with braid and you get this hit where it about jerks your rod to the water and then you miss the fish because there's no softness, there's no flex in that line. And so I'm a very firm believer in mono for dragging.
A few more people stopped in. Fins and Fines, Whiskers and Stripes, Tim with Kentucky Big Cats. Seen Mustang Max come in. And Dragon, you got to have a lot of line. What reels do you use?
So when I'm dragging, again, there is no reel that's better than another one. I happen to be an Abu Garcia fan, so I use a lot of 6500s. Now, when I'm dragging, so at any time I'm dragging, I have for blue cats, I'll have one or two what we call the long line, and I use a 7000, and I will empty 2/3 of that spool. I mean, literally, I'll run lines 200, 300 yards behind the boat, just to get away from the boat. Um, you know, so if we're running 4 planar boards and that furthest one back, you know, I may have 100 yards behind that furthest one, and it's already 100 yards from the boat. So, I'm a firm believer of getting away from the boat. So, in that regard, so the 7000s on my long lines, because I can hold just a ton of 30-pound mono on it. I like 30-pound mono, always in a high vis. Catfish are not line shy at all on the colors. But if you go to 40-pound and you snag, you probably ain't, you can't break 40. There's too much stretch in it, and it's just too much. 30 you can still break, so that's my difference. If you can't land a 100-pound fish on 30-pound line, shame on you. Again, make sure whatever reel you're using, Penns, Abu, Shimano's, doesn't matter, but you better make sure it's got a smooth drag, at that point, and you can deal with it.
Seen another question pop up. It's Two Stands Fishing wants to know, is there a preferred bait or bait size for dragging, or is it the same as you would use if you're anchored?
Well, a couple things come into play. When I'm dragging, I need a bait that's aerodynamic in the water, if that makes sense. In other words, if I drag something the size of my fist, right? I mean, that's, like a skipjack head. I want to make sure that he's hooked either, through the nostril, through the chin, so that he's aerodynamic and that bait goes through the water and goes straight, doesn't spin and do crazy stuff. If I'm fishing a fillet, you have to be careful because fillets can get crazy. You got to make sure you got swivels and, things like that. Even if you're anchored in heavy current, right? We've all done that, reeled in a bait that has just fluttered, and by the time you pull it in, your line's all twisted, the leader's shot, and you got to throw it out. So you need to think about that. When I'm dragging shad, I always hook them either, through the chin or through the eyes. If I'm hooking skipjack, I love like shad heads for big fish. But when I cut a shad up, I cut them into strips like maybe the size of my thumb or something like that, like an inch wide and 3 inches long, and I'll hook it through the nose. Now, there are times when they're short biting where instead of fishing a bait, 3 inches long, I'll turn it into a square and put the hook right in the middle of it. So, I mean, this time of year, I would not fish a fillet or anything like that because they're just going to grab the end of it and not chase it. This time of year, cold water, cold front, when they're locked down on the bottom, you want as small as bait as they can fit in their mouth. So in channel cat tournaments, this will make sense to most people. When I start off and I'm dragging, I'll start with small baits, like inch and a half square, or, the size of your finger, a strip 3/4 inches wide and maybe 3 inches long. But by the end of the tournament, where my smallest fish is 4 pounds and I'm looking to upgrade, I'm fishing, a whole shad the size of my hand, You're always upgrading because at that point, if he's not big enough to eat that shad, I don't want him at that point. So that's something that is hard to do for new guys that are fishing and tournament guys. It's hard to leave fish to find bigger fish. That's hard to do. And I struggle with it. If you're on some medium fish, it's like, man, do I leave fish or do I not leave fish? And I've learned you got to leave fish. You got to take a chance. You have to do that. And so, some people will be like, why would I fish a huge bait? Well, at the end of the tournament, it's go big or go home sometimes, right? You know that. And
Yes, sir.
and you just have to do that. So like when me and Ryan fish, Ryan is the big bait guy, and I'm the fill up the box guy. So I always fish smaller baits. He always fishes big baits, and sometimes he'll catch the biggest fish. Sometimes I'll catch the biggest fish. It just depends. But together we always have a mix of things. And so at the beginning of a tournament, we'll run 4 or 6 different rigs and try to narrow down by the end of the tournament what rig's working the best and change things over.
Miss Betty wants to know: are you still dragging baits in lakes when water temp is in the 30s? Just slower.
I was dragging baits today, and water was 36 degrees. So, like I said, the lake was locked up. We only fished for about an hour. We spent most of our time trying to catch shad that I could stockpile for the spring. So we fished for about an hour. We had 4 rods out. We didn't have any bites, but I'm sure I could have found fish today. We had a pretty good wind, so I had 4 drift socks out, keeping us at about 0.3. You know, I would say in the winter, the fish are not as active. Now, I do ice fish a lot. I was up on Saginaw Bay last weekend, up in Michigan, caught a bunch of perch, but we catch channels all winter long. In fact, about 2 weekends ago, we had an ice fishing tournament here. I won big fish on that with about a 5-pound channel cat, and I caught about 15 channel cats that day. So again, channel cats are by far the most winter active fish, but they're not going to chase real hard. You'll catch them. You always see the videos this time of year, even with blues. They've got mud all over their bellies. They're camped down on the bottom, and they're not going to chase real hard until that water gets up into the high 40s, closer to 50. That's when you can start speeding up more.
Seen another question pop in from Mr. Hagen Grubbs. Thank you for being here. I pinned it. Where'd it go? There it is. Where does Mark see tournament catfishing 5 years from now?
Ooh, boy, I tell you what, in the last 3 years, it has doubled and tripled. I don't know how much further it's going to go. I think a lot of people are going to get into the tournaments. And I know usually every year or two, I try to help a lot of people. I think, I try to throw people bones, because if they don't do well in a tournament, they're not going to stay very long. So I think as a responsible angler, you need to mentor people, give them some of the right information, because there's a whole bunch of crap out there on the internet. I can just tell you. I mean, I would feel sorry. I mean, I hate to say I'm an old timer, because I'm still learning, but I think in today's age I am. I've done this for almost 20 years now. And, Doc was one of my mentors, and Bink, Bink Fox, and Randy Bundy here locally. All 3 of those guys, every so often they'd say, you might want to try this. It was their nice way of saying what you're doing is not right. And so, I would say if you're new in the tournament scheme, try to befriend some of the people. I mean, yeah, there's jerks out there, but most of the guys after the tournament, they'll give you some hints. If you ask the right questions, they'll, I mean, the right question is not, where did you catch that fish? The question might be, so, how deep of water were you, what type of water were you catching that fish in? Try to ask the right questions, and without giving it away. Most of the guys will tell you, especially at the end of the day, especially in club tournaments, right? It should be fun. Yeah, it's serious, but at the end of the day, tomorrow's a whole different day. Could be something different. So, if you watch most of the tournament guys, we don't post a ton of stuff on Facebook. I mean, we're like, oh, we caught this, but we don't say, oh, I was at this depth doing exactly this, and here's why I was doing it. tournament guys aren't that way. I mean, you know, a lot of guys are like, "Hey, Mark, you should do more videos." I'm like, well, you know, I'm a tournament guy. That's hard to do, right? During a tournament, I don't typically video because then people see where you're at. They know what you're doing. You know, I mean, there's enough pressure. And then with a lot of the videos, we need to be responsible about showing places and spots. There are no secrets in today's world, but at the same time, you know, if you're posting, "Oh, I'm right here and look at what I'm doing," you know, there's commercial guys watching the videos, there's new people, there's, you know, all I can say is when you show up and there's 5 people in your spot, you need to, you know, think about, you know, we are our own worst enemies when we show fish pictures. You know, tournament guys always show pictures at the bottom of their boat, right? And that's why it's like, oh, here's a nice fish. I'm holding it, but you can't see any landmarks in the background. And so when we're out videoing, we need to be responsible in that regard that, you know, you're always going to be blowing somebody else's spot up. You know, you may think it's your spot, but it's not. Other
Right.
people do it. I see videos every day on here that I'm like, I know where that is. Oh, yeah, you know, you know, mental note, but you know what I'm saying? It's one of those things that we just need to be responsible in that regard. But as far as the tournament anglers and where it goes, and I'm sorry I got off track, but you know, the guys that are out there doing it need to help people to keep people involved. And as at the club tournament, we need to not be jerks, you know, and try to help people. I know people help me, and that's why I try to pass it on. I mean, that's you know, and I try to instill that when I help people. I say, hey, you know what? Down the road, you help somebody else. You know, we all have to do that. And a lot of the national tournament guys are all some of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. And you ask the right questions, they'll tell you anything that you know want to know. So.
We got another quick question. How long of a leader do Mark use for dragging?
Depends on the day, the species, the lake, the clarity of the water, everything. I would say typically for channel cats, I run, so right now, I usually use like a 2-hook rig. And so behind my dragging sinker, I'll run 1 hook, maybe 6 inches right behind it. So it's close to the bottom. And then maybe another foot to a peg float and then a hook behind that. So typically about a 2-foot leader for me for channels. Once we start getting into like blues, I would say probably anywhere from 3 to 6 or 7 feet. We'll run some long leaders. Blues, depending on how suspended they are and how active fish are, is how much of a leader that I want to keep my baits off the bottom. And Mike, you've probably seen late in the summer, you'll have a thermocline down there below the dam, and you'll be in 60 foot of water and you'll be catching flatheads 30 foot down, right? And you're like, why? He's not even close to the bottom. Why? How did I catch that? But he'll, you know, those fish will suspend in the deep summer because of that thermocline. So that's another thing. You have to be careful that if you don't know what a thermocline is, go do some homework and learn that, especially here in the Midwest and our lakes, right? That's the level, a point in a lake here locally, Southwest Ohio, about 20 to 21 foot deep in July. Any deeper than that, even though the lake may be 60 foot deep, there's hardly any oxygen below that level. So if you do some research, that's a good area. But that's one example where fish will suspend above that. So again, depending on how active the fish are, is how much off the bottom I will fish. So I'll like today. I mean, behind a short dragging weight, because I don't want a real long dragging weight. You know, I mean, like right here, I have a structure snake. That's oops, there you go. This is a 2-ounce structure snake. So this is about 9 inches long. So today I was fishing a 1 ounce, which is only about 3 inches long. Or a lot of times guys will fish, you know, pencil sinkers. So you get a pencil sinker, you know, that's only 3 inches long, and I'll put a hook 6 inches behind it this time of year because those fish are right on the bottom. But once they become active, then I'll start going to a longer leader with a peg float, and we can get into hours of discussion on peg floats. But just a couple things real quick. Don't use a float bigger than you need. You want that bait to be neutral, not hanging straight up. As far as dragging weights, I see people fishing for channel cats fishing, 6 ounce, 6 ounce dragging weights, or these Larry Muse sinkers that are, 3 feet long and maybe weigh 8 ounces or something like that. I want the absolute lightest weight I can get away with so that my bait is just ticking along the bottom. Now, if it's a very choppy day, and you know what I mean by choppy, where the boat's bouncing up and down and the rods are jerking up and down, I'll go to a heavier weight just to keep that weight closer to the bottom, not jerking out of the fish's range. So those are a couple good tips over the years I've learned. I know we're getting short on time here pretty quick, but another good tip, let's talk about rattles. People always say, oh, what do you think about rattles? Well, I can tell you that I won a whole lot of money using rattles. So if I go back, people think rattles are new, right? And, demon dragons and stuff like that. Well, let me just tell you, I keep this in my tackle box. I got this right here. People should know what this is, right? Little red and white bobber. You see on the front of it, that's some RTV. I put some ball bearings in there. You can hear a rattle. And back in about 2005, 2006, I used this nonstop and caught a lot of fish. In my opinion, rattles do not hurt you, but they may help. They never hurt. I mean, I spent years running comparison rigs with and without rattles. The little inline Versa rattles available from Chubby Fish Outdoors. I use those constantly. I'll put 2 or 3 of them on. They're almost disposable, as cheap as they are now. But I will tell you, in the early spring, in chocolate milk conditions, when fish cannot see a bait, rattles will increase your catch tenfold. I would run 4 rods, 2 with, 2 without, and I mean identical. Same rods, same reels, same line, same leaders, everything. And I had days where 10-to-1 came on the rattles. And then most days, it'd be about the same, 50-50. So I don't think a rattle will ever hurt you. I can't imagine a hungry fish would be like, it's rattling. That's not normal. Why would I eat that? Right? If anything, you're going to call in fish, especially in that muddy water when they lose their sight. Now they have to depend on their other senses. So a rattle, they're going to hear that and they're going to be, looking for food or sensing that rattle. So, that's some good advice. I can tell you after years and years and years, I always have rattles on one way or another.
We're going to try to get 2 more questions in before we hang it up. I've seen a few more people come in. Janice, Hooks, Mr. Duggar, Dale, Kevin. Appreciate y'all stopping by at the end here. And what's your favorite memory in fishing?
Ooh. I have a couple. Probably when I in a Cabela's tournament a couple years ago down in Gallipolis, Ohio, on the upper Ohio River, right on the West Virginia border. We were vertical drifting, and I ended up catching the West Virginia state record, blue cat, right at 60 pounds, and it's still a record today, but not for very much longer, I'm sure. But that was pretty cool. And Chris Souders still beat us by 2 pounds that day. So that's one. A couple other ones. Another Cabela's tournament over in Morgantown, West Virginia. I had a 38.5-pound flathead. That was a big fish over there. And Willie Smith beat me by 2 pounds that day. So even when you catch these huge fish, there's always somebody that's going to beat you. That's for sure. A couple of, me and Ryan took second at the Cat Masters on the Mississippi River at Helena last fall. That was really cool. I mean, that was one of those days where we caught, I don't know, we probably caught 20, 25 fish bumping in a day. So that was cool. We were on the fish, and nothing like culling 25 pounders,
Right.
Doesn't happen very often. It's one of those days where you're like, even if we didn't place, we were like, man, that was a great day of fishing. So
Yes.
you know how that works. So.
Well, hey, I'm going to have to hang this up, but I really appreciate you coming on and hanging out with
No
us.
problem. Just let me know anytime.
Well, we're definitely got to do it again because I've got a whole lot more questions to ask, and we can make a pretty good show. So, but I appreciate everybody being here. You got something else to say?
I was just going to say, I'm on Facebook, right? You guys can message me. If you have questions, I always take time to try to help people. Again, no problem. All the time I get questions from people I never heard of, and I'm like, oh yeah, whatever. I'll try to help you out. That's no problem. So, but I appreciate
well, we appreciate you.
Okay, thank you so much, and everybody that came in.
See you guys. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next weekend.